Hello, my name is Kit Cabello. I'm one of the co-founders of Veracity In Defiance, and we are right now in the Friends Center at 1501 Cherry Street here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm here with...
Sam Bernhardt.
All right, now, who are you, Sam, and what's your organization about?
Sure, so I'm the senior Pennsylvania organizer for Food and Water Watch. We're here at our office at the Friends Center, and we work to fight fracking in Pennsylvania.
All right. Now, fracking obviously has been linked to a lot of studies of contaminating water, causing serious health effects. What's the current situation here in Pennsylvania in regards to fracking?
So Pennsylvania is the second most heavily fracked state in the country, and we've seen tremendous impacts, negative impacts all around the state. As you mentioned, people's water is getting contaminated, and we've now seen hundreds of documented cases of people's water being contaminated. We've seen air pollution from the gas leaks that are coming from fracking wells and pipelines. We've seen communities being fractured. Food and Water Watch has put out research showing that in fracked communities, heavy truck accidents rates go up. We've seen venereal disease rates go up in fracked communities. We've seen arrest rates go up in fracked communities. So fracking is an environmental issue, it's a social issue, and it's a climate change issue. Fracking is by far the biggest contributor to climate change here in Pennsylvania. The methane that is leaking from our wells, from our pipelines, on its way to the market, is a much stronger greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So for the future of our planet, fracking needs to be stopped.
All right, so what is right now the statistical data showing the damage to the Pennsylvania environment? Obviously, to frack, you need to drill into the ground, and as you drill for that natural resource, underground water is going to be contaminated. How much of the state of Pennsylvania has been affected, especially its underground water resources? How much have they been affected by the fracking that's been going on in the state?
Well, we really there's no definitive sort of this is the percentage of our state's water that's been contaminated. What we know is people in fracked communities are dealing with contaminated water supplies. We've seen it time and time again. So I can't say it's this percentage, but we know that this inherently dangerous process, when it is allowed to unfold in communities, that it impacts people's waters. Thankfully, here in Philadelphia, we're in the Delaware River Basin, which means that we don't have fracking in our watershed. So we know that for at least that part of the state, we are protected from at least the water contamination impacts of fracking in our watershed. But people around the state certainly are dealing with polluted water.
All right, and at the county and state level government, has there been any officials that has stepped up to challenge the fracking organizations that are here in the state of Pennsylvania? Are there any politicians or individual state leaders that are standing up to this obviously growing concern?
Yeah, definitely. As we become more and more cognizant of the impacts that fracking is having on communities around the state, elected officials, community leaders are stepping up.
How so exactly? Because obviously money in politics plays a huge role in our current American political system, and those with the most money can buy off our politicians. And this is something that Americans we're just being made aware of now. So here in Pennsylvania, obviously, we want to hear about state officials. Has there been any individual state senator or state house representative or even the governor of Pennsylvania themselves stepping up to this challenge of stopping fracking?
So certainly money in politics is an issue, and the fracking industry is one of the most powerful special interest groups in terms of money that's going into elected officials' pockets. And they have been quite successful at building, scaring both Democrats and Republicans to support pro-fracking policies. rather than policies that are actually going to protect Pennsylvanians. That being said, as I mentioned, elected officials are waking up. So just a couple, 2 months ago, State Senator Sean Wiley in Erie County, which is the northwest corner of the state, came out and said he wants a moratorium on fracking in the Lake Erie watershed. We're seeing other types of elected officials speak out against fracking. Food and Water Watch delivered a letter to the Democratic Party Platform Committee at its Orlando meeting, signed by over 200 delegates. Dozens of them were from here in Pennsylvania. We also had local elected officials sign on to that letter. So at the state level, we've been mainly targeting Governor Tom Wolf, who is pro-fracking. He maintains that we can tax fracking, we can regulate fracking, we can do it safely. But more and more we're seeing cracks created in the veneer of democratic unity in support of fracking.
Obviously, we all know about the health dangers of fracking. Obviously, to tax fracking and to let it go on, it's going to continue more and more corruption and contaminate our water resources even further. So let me ask you this, because if the politicians, especially the governors who want to tax it and exploit fracking, don't understand the issues of why it's bad, why are you concerned about fracking? Why does this issue concern you? What about it makes you want to fight this good fight to make sure that we have a clean environment, clean air, clean water? What's your stake in this battle? What do you want to say to our viewers?
Climate change is one of the most important issues of my generation. Years ago, we thought that natural gas was, or some people thought that natural gas was, as they would say,
Clean energy, right?
Clean energy, a bridge fuel. More and more we're seeing signs that shows the exact opposite, that fracked gas is as bad or worse for climate change as coal, as oil, as any other fossil fuel. If we are serious about solving climate change, we need to stop fracking, period.
Obviously, right now there is, especially in our current political system, especially in Washington, D.C., we have politicians on both sides who take money from large oil, large fracking industry, and some politicians have the gall to say that climate change is nothing but a hoax. They ignore it. What's your thoughts on this current political system that we have? And added to that, what do you want to say to those politicians who are saying that climate change is a hoax? Because you have 99% of the scientific community saying that climate change is a scientific fact and that it's a real danger that humanity is going to have to face for the long term.
Sure. So we need serious changes to our political system. We need campaign finance reform. We need, what are really common sense solutions to reinvigorating democracy in a way that will actually empower the public. We're also seeing in this crazy election cycle that speaking the truth can be enough to be successful, to run a successful campaign. Bernie Sanders, who I guess as of yesterday is no longer running for...
That's correct. He's no longer the Democratic nominee. Hillary Clinton is the appointed Democratic nominee.
Right. So I think Bernie Sanders, aside from building the progressive movement, demonstrated that if you speak truth to power, if you speak directly to the 99%, not only will you get their votes, you'll also get their money. And while the 1% controls most of the wealth in our country, we're at an exciting time in our country where the 99% is realizing the power that we have, not only in the ballot box, but by donating amounts as small as as Bernie would say $27. So we need these changes, but we also know that if we run effective campaigns that speak the truth to people who want to hear it, and the American public wants to hear it, we can make real progress. And that's important, because to make those campaign finance reform changes, we're gonna need to run those effective campaigns. We're gonna need to win to make those changes. What do I say to the establishment in Washington, D.C. that doesn't believe in climate change? I say you're losing. The majority of the American public believes in climate change, wants us to prioritize solving climate change. Our movement is only growing, and we're going to win.
All right, well, then let me ask you this then. Especially in regards to climate change, do you think the corporate media has the capacity and the power to actually effectively cover climate change, or do you think they're just going to keep on calling it even? Because when we hear on the media, when they talk about fracking and oil and coal, they usually have a scientist on there who explains the dangers of climate change and dangers of using fossil fuels, and then they have someone who's going to be the counterbalance to him, and they just call it 50-50 without informing the American public. What's your thoughts on the corporate media and how they're handling climate change?
Sure. So Food and Water Watch actually has been doing work to shame CNN for its failure to cover the issue of climate change. So we believe pretty firmly that the media is at fault here, as in addition to our elected officials, and that needs to change. We need media outlets that actually educate people about the facts, rather than, as you said, trying to present, give equal time to quote unquote two sides, when one side is right and the other side is wrong.
Obviously, what happened here too in Philadelphia, the DNC, they were going to pick who they want as their Democratic nominee. Hillary Clinton has been appointed as a Democratic nominee by the superdelegates and the delegates. Do you believe that a Clinton administration is going to effectively combat climate change and combat fracking, or do you think it's just something that they're going to flip-flop on? And your thoughts on whether or not the Clinton administration, a potential Clinton administration, has the ability to really follow through on some of the campaign promises that they've made, especially in regards to climate change and protecting the environment.
So we need elected officials, we need leaders to show real leadership on climate change. And for the majority of the American public, just recognizing that climate change exists is simply not good enough. We need elected officials who are not only willing to acknowledge that problems exist, but actually take meaningful steps to solve them. The most important thing that any presidential administration can do to solve the problem of climate change is to ban fracking. So I think what we'll see from candidate Clinton or President Clinton is an attempt to show that she's doing something while not actually solving the problem, and we need to make sure to hold her feet to the fire and make sure that that she shows real climate leadership, which means banning fracking.
Well, Hillary Clinton, throughout the Democratic primary, has been known to flip-flop on certain issues. Donald Trump, he's been known to say that climate change is a hoax. He's not going to really combat it or address it at all in his administration. So Americans who are educated, especially in regards to climate change, and Americans who are finding out about the dangers of fracking and climate change, do you believe that because of the two options that are presented to Americans, more people are going to go to a third-party candidate like Dr. Jill Stein, who has an environmentalist policy? Do you believe that Dr. Jill Stein will be able to attract disenfranchised Bernie Sanders supporters, as well as more people who want to get actively involved in politics, not only for themselves, but the good for the next generation, for the good of the planet?
Well, I mean, we're seeing that literally here at the Friends Center today, right? Down the hall from us is an event with Jill Stein running for president, she's obviously appealing to a segment of American voters. So, yes, I believe she will get votes in the election.
But especially with a candidate like that, do you think that the corporate media is going to give Dr. Jill Stein a fair platform? Because if we look at how the corporate media handled Bernie Sanders, especially was talking about climate change, you did have the talking heads waving it off, especially when we talked about money in politics. We had a few pundits talk that at least it said that money in politics is a single issue. It's nothing big to worry about. Climate change, nothing can be done about it. Do you feel that Dr. Jill Stein will be able to at least challenge the corporate media to really make them aware that, yes, climate change is a danger to our planet, a danger to our country? And do you think that the corporate media will give her a fair, at least, shot on the debate stage?
Well, I certainly hope that the American public gets access to all the appropriate information for all of the presidential candidates. Yeah, if they don't, it's a problem. What do I think is going to happen? I think, as you alluded to, we have a corporate media that is first in service of the 1%, in service of the very opponents who are fighting in most of our campaigns, the oil and gas industry, on our issue, but other special interests on other issues. So the corporate media has a vested interest in presenting a very specific narrative that frequently misrepresents the issues that we work on and underplays the real movements for justice that are strong and present in communities around the country. So they certainly have that. They also, unfortunately, have a vested interest in ratings and in attracting viewers. And I think the story of the horse race story, the one person versus another person story, is I think unfortunately an easier narrative to present than actually it's one person versus another person versus another person versus another person. So it seems like it'll be an uphill battle for anyone outside the two-party system to get media coverage, but I certainly hope that those who are fighting to do that are successful.
All right. Now, obviously, fracking's happening here in Pennsylvania. You mentioned it was the second state was the most fracking nationwide, but let's look at the country on a greater total. How large is the fracking industry in the continental United States? How vast has it grown? And is there any chance of at least stopping it before it becomes unmanageable?
Yeah, definitely.
But nationwide, like how many states have fracking going on?
Sure. So I don't have a specific number. It's a lot of states, really all over the country, wherever they find these so-called shale plays, these rock formations that contain either oil or natural gas. The most heavily fracked state is Texas. Then comes Pennsylvania. Other states that are heavily fracked include Oklahoma, Wyoming, California, New York. Up to our north in Pennsylvania has a ban on fracking. Maryland to our south has a moratorium on fracking. So the fracking industry is quite powerful, has grown over the last decade. They've grown over the last decade. America is now the largest oil exporter in the world, but the economics underlying the fracking industry are really fragile. And if we continue to build a movement that shows real power to decision makers. We can protect American communities by stopping fracking in states and municipalities around the country.
All right, and last question, especially to our viewers, subscribers, and anyone who's going to watch this video, where can they go to help you and your organization?
Sure. So Food and Water Watch, we have a website. It's foodandwaterwatch.org. And you can also text the word frack to the number 69866.
Thank you very much. This is Kit Cabello, one of the co-founders of Veracity In Defiance. We're here at the Friends Center covering the Green Party rally for Dr. Jill Stein. Please follow us on our YouTube and other social media sites. Take care.